Good evening, folks, and hope you're enjoying your New Year's Eve. It's the last night of the year, so I figured it was time to give my wrap up of the year 2024. So, same thing as last year, we're just going to go through all the noteworthy games that came out this year, and I'm just going to give some brief thoughts on them. So, in general, I think it's agreed that 2024 wasn't a particularly good year for gaming, and for me, it didn't get off to a terribly good start with our first game, which is Prince of Persia and the Last Crown. Now, I was actually really excited for this game. I'm a big fan of the Prince of Persia series, and it had been so long since the last game in the franchise, so the fact that they were putting out another one, I was just so excited to play it, especially when they announced that they were also doing a remaster of The Sands of Time. Unfortunately, The Lost Crown didn't really do it for me. Now, I'm not going to say that this is a terrible game. There's still a lot to like about The Lost Crown. The story is actually pretty good. The presentation is stellar. It does have some unique gameplay ideas too. But at the same time, I got a lot of issues with it. As a Metroidvania game, I honestly thought it was a little sloppy. The pacing was slow, the sense of progression wasn't terribly good, and it just didn't hit the right marks that I tend to look for in a game like this. And even worse, I couldn't help but feel like this game wasn't trying very hard to be a Prince of Persia game. When I think of a Prince of Persia game, I think of a very characteristic weight to the character, as well as very thought-based platforming. But this game just seemed content to just be your run-of-the-mill Metroidvania game. It's a decent one, but there are better games in the genre you can play, and there's definitely better games in this series that you can play. It's also a little disappointing that since last year we haven't heard anything about the Sands of Time remake, and a lot of people are assuming that Ubisoft has canceled it, which I really hope isn't the case because they're definitely due for a win after the year they had. Another game that I gave a try this year was Tekken 8. Me and Tony covered the first Tekken game in preparation for the release of this game, so I figured I should gamefly Tekken 8. And you know what? It was a pretty solid fighter, but I'm still definitely a bigger fan of the Street Fighter series. The 6-button system just works better for me. I still had a lot of fun playing Tekken. It was fun to mess around with. The graphics were beautiful. I mean, just look at this. Lots of great multiplayer options. Just a really solid fighter. They did a pretty good job with it, and I look forward to playing it again later this year. Now for one of the first failures of the year. Now, I think part of the reason a lot of people were so down on 2024 was a lot of the big releases of this year, or ones that were supposed to be the big releases of the year, ended up being poorly thought out attempts to create, a live service game. And the first up to bat was, of course, WB's Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. A game I honestly had no interest in playing simply because of the title alone. I just thought it was awful, and I'm getting really tired of the cliche of the evil Justice League or Avengers team that, has been really popular ever since The Boys came out. I just think it's a very cheap and cliche way to get around the Superman issue. And I also didn't really understand the logic behind doing this one. First, why would you want to do a Suicide Squad game anyway? Now, I'm not saying that there's not a lot of potential there, but last time I checked, people didn't really like the Suicide Squad movies. And in addition to that, why even bother? Because they didn't really take advantage of the IP either. Because at the end of the day, this is just a crappy looter shooter with a slight DC Comics paint job to it. It was repetitive, the gameplay wasn't that satisfying, it was at times inappropriate. I remember this one pissing a lot of people off with certain content of it. And yeah, I get that this game was made to compete with the Avengers game that Square did. Unfortunately, that game ended up doing poorly, so they were kind of stuck putting this game out, but I mean, surely you can try harder than this. I mean, Yeah, Suicide Squad wasn't very good, and I think it's failed so epically that WB Games has already announced that they're pulling support for the game, which isn't surprising. Hopefully, now that they've had their fill of this live service nonsense, as well as the lukewarm reception that Gotham Knights got last year, that they'll put Rocksteady to work on that Superman game that everyone has been asking for. Yeah, everyone's been asking for ever since Arkham Knight, guys. I mean, come on, what were you thinking with this game? Another one of the big live service failures of the year was Ubisoft's Skull and Bones. Now, I remember when Skull and Bones was first announced, and I didn't have any interest in it either. I just figured it would be a grittier version of Sea of Thieves, which I know Sea of Thieves has gotten a lot better since its initial launch, but I haven't had a chance to try it. So I didn't really have an interest in it, and I honestly forgot that this was even a thing until it released earlier this year. And it wasn't very good either. It was somehow more mind-numbing, repetitive, grindy than even Suicide Squad was. And I'm not sure why the game ended up like this. I mean, I heard that there was a lot of behind-the-scenes issues with this game, constantly trying to figure out what the game would be, what they wanted it to be, even though what it should have been was very clear. All people wanted this to be was a big MMO version of Assassin's Creed Black Flag, a game that is actually pretty damn good. So, like, what were you guys thinking with this game? Like, you sunk all this money into it, and then you try this quadruple A game marketing. Like, yeah, I haven't heard anything about this game since, what is it? Angry Joe's video on it. And from what I understand, Ubisoft lost a lot of money on this game, so it doesn't look like it's going to be sticking around for much longer. So, like, two live service games down already, and we haven't even got into the biggest failure yet, but we will get to that. Before we get to that, though, let's actually look at some games that people are going to be talking about in the coming years. And the first one I want to bring mention to is Penny's Bid Breakaway. This was made by, I want to say, Morningstar Studios. I usually just refer to them as the Mania team because it's the guys who did Sonic Mania. After getting tired of Sega's micromanaging and crap like that, at least that's my speculation. I know Morningstar has denied that, but when I heard they were doing an original platformer free of the Sonic series, I was actually very enthusiastic about it. And you know what? Penny's Bid Breakaway was loads of fun. The controls were great. It had a lot of interesting ideas as far as the platformer goes. And it did some really cool things with the momentum-based platforming. This is the kind of stuff I wish Sonic Team would try with the Sonic game. But unfortunately, they'd rather screw around with crappy open-world games or, you know, stuff that they know will be a guaranteed win for them, like Sonic and Shadow Generations this year. Honestly, it was kind of hard to be a Sonic fan this year, with the exception of Sonic Prime Season 3, which was really good, and of course the IDW comics. Sonic just didn't do it for me this year. While I enjoyed Sonic X Shadow Generations, I couldn't help but feel like Sega was again wussing out and also exposing some of their obvious incompetence. And don't even get me started on Sonic 3, people. Like, I was... yeah. Let's just move on before I go off on a tangent there. One of the more underrated games to come out this year was definitely Alone in the Dark. Now, despite the fact that the original Alone in the Dark is one of the most influential games in the horror genre, there hasn't really been another really good game in the series since then. There have definitely been attempts to bring it back, but they've just never been able to come up with anything concrete. And they finally pulled it off with this year's game. Now, at the end of the day, yeah, it is essentially just a Resident Evil 2 remake clone, but it's a very polished clone of the Resident Evil remake, and it's still able to feel fresh, primarily because of the old school setting and the Lovecraftian vibes that you get from this game. Though it is indicative of a lot of survival horror games that have been coming out recently, I still think it manages to hold its own very well. So if you passed on this game this year and you're a fan of the horror genre, be sure to check it out. It's definitely worth a playthrough. Another game that I was curious about this year was Princess Peach Showtime. So, outside of the fact that it was kind of neat to see Peach get her own video game again, it had been a long time since that happened. I actually thought the gameplay premise was interesting as well. I like the idea of the different outfits and how that changes the gameplay. While it didn't really amount to a terribly compelling game, I would say, there was still plenty of creativity on display here for me to still give it a recommendation. I would say that this is more in line for people who are fans of Kirby or, little kids, but it's still fun enough. There are worse games you can play. I actually would like to see Nintendo revisit this idea and do a little bit more with it, because I feel like there is some squandered potential here. But yeah, Princess Peach Showtime, not a bad game at all. Oh, here's the big stinker of the year, Concord. Holy crap. Much like Suicide Squad and Skull and Bones, this was Sony's big attempt at putting out a live service game so they could get a little bit of that Fortnite gravy. But unfortunately, this was just another game that was doomed to failure. Apart from the fact that this game entered production in the first place, primarily to compete with Overwatch, the big hero shooter boom of the day, it just took too long to come out, and by the time it was approaching the end of its development, Overwatch had run its course, and Overwatch 2 is a thing, but I haven't heard any good things about that, and based on the reviews I've seen on Steam, a lot of people don't like that game, so the hero shooter just isn't what it used to be. And it also didn't help that whenever Sony showed this game off, they would mostly just show off, cutscenes and stuff like that, trying to promote it like Valve did with TF2 or how Blizzard promoted Overwatch. And a lot of people are just wondering what the gameplay was. And what was bad about that was, based on what people were seeing of Concord, they were not impressed. I remember seeing Sony's trailer at one of their State of Play events, and I was not impressed with it, and that seems to track across the internet. And then people actually saw gameplay of it and realized it was just a hero shooter, and then interest dropped from to zilch. But I think the biggest failure of Overwatch is simply the fact that whereas Ubisoft and WB Games at least gave their games a chance to, try and catch on, as you're supposed to do if you want to put out a live service game, Sony just killed off Concord within a couple of days. And honestly, people really have underestimated what a bad move this was for them. Because if they really want to get a live service game out the door, one of the things that you need to have is some consumer confidence. So that's part of the reason why I figured Suicide Squad and Skull and Bones was going to be bad, because people don't really have that consumer confidence in WB Games or Ubisoft. People are aware of some of the shady business dealings that they do, or business practices that they subject consumers to. But Sony, they could have pulled it off if they had done it right. Maybe done something similar to what Nintendo does with Splatoon, just with maybe a more extensive cosmetic suites for an online market and everything. But unfortunately, that's just not going to happen with Concord. They realized very quickly it just wasn't going to work for them. And because they abandoned it, next time they try to do one of these live service games, gamers probably aren't going to give it a chance. They're probably just going to assume it's going to go the way of Concord and die within a couple of days. And I have a feeling that's going to piss off distributors as well, because this was a game that required online features to play. So if Walmart had a large stock of the game, they were kind of stuck with it, for example. So yeah, Concord, easily the biggest failure of 2024. And really, Sony has they did terribly this year, dude. Like, they keep talking about how budgets are ballooning. It seems like they're relying a little too much on the hardware and not the software like you're supposed to do to make money. And like the PS5 Pro, with its price point and its lack of features, that's also leaving a bad taste in the mouth of consumers. And they did have one bright spot this year, and we will get to that, I promise. But yeah, Sony, you really need to change your game plan, because what you're doing now, it just ain't cutting it. When Nintendo rolls out the successor to the Switch, you're going to be in big trouble if you stay on this course. Okay, so here's a game that I feel was unfairly treated. Now, Star Wars Outlaws, it got a lot of hate primarily for its price point. For the best version of the game, I think it was a triple-digit figure. And a lot of people really hate the game too, and they really shouldn't have done that with Star Wars to begin with. And they really didn't need to do that with Star Wars to begin with. Just by virtue of the fact that it has Star Wars on the box, people are going to play it regardless. I mean, just look at what happened with Respawn's Jedi games. EA did not really have a lot of faith in those games, but when they came out, they did gangbusters. So doing that with the price point was just a really bad idea, because it turned a lot of people off to the game. And it's a shame, because all things considered, Jedi Outlaws isn't that bad a game. While it is, in essence, just Far Cry with Star Wars paint job, it's still pretty well polished, and it is a lot of fun to go tearing around on the bikes, sneaking around enemy facilities, and blasting people with your lasers. It's kind of a shame that more people didn't play this one, because it really isn't that bad. Now for Sony's big bright spot of the year, and this is one that I'm still playing, so my thoughts on it are a little incomplete, but Astrobot is just as good as everyone says it is. This came very close to being my game of the year, because it's just so much fun. Like, the controls are great, the level design is fantastic, they have a lot of creative gimmicks in the levels that make everyone feel fresh. There's a decent amount of content. There's not too much content either. It doesn't feel bloated like so many other platformers. And it also is a fun celebration of Sony's history too. A lot of people forget, I think this was their 30th anniversary. So there's a lot of Easter eggs packed into this game in regards to the different characters that appear in it from all different Sony games. And it was just a lot of fun seeing that. There's even some levels that are based off of legacy franchises, like there's one for Ape Escape, Uncharted, it's God of War, obviously. It's just a really good game, and I'm glad the VGAs gave this one Game of the Year, because I was afraid they were going to give it to something like Indiana Jones in The Great Circle. But yeah, this one is really good, and it actually is a good indication of where Sony needs to go. The thing about Astrobot is that this game was made for significantly less money than Concord. And it probably has sold a lot less than other games that have come out on the PS5 in the years it's been on the market. But because the production cost was so much lower, it was able to get away with selling fewer copies and still be profitable. And I hope Sony realizes that if instead of throwing all their money into a great big AAA title, if they spread it out over some smaller games, maybe taking advantage of their back catalog of franchises with like an Ape Escape or Sly Cooper, Jak and Daxter, stuff along those lines, that they could probably make a little extra money and then put those towards bigger AAA games as well, which is something that they really need to do. I have had my PS5 for a couple of years, and I can still count the amount of games I own on it that are exclusive to it on one hand. I don't even think I have 4 games on my shelf for the PS5, but I have a whole catalog of like Nintendo Switch games. So there's already talk of a PS6, which I really hope they don't do, and I hope they don't do something stupid like make a lot of games exclusive to the PS5 Pro. Like, you don't make money off the hardware, you make it off the software. Make some damn games, Sony. That is all I am asking. So, another game that I was curious about but not really excited for was The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. I'm not the biggest fan of 2D Zelda games. Like, I started with Wind Waker, so I'm more accustomed to the 3D games. But I still wanted to give Echoes of Wisdom a try, simply because it's the first real Zelda game where you get to play as Zelda. And what was cool about this game is that it wasn't your traditional The Legend of Zelda game either. It was actually more thought-based, I found, with its puzzles and everything. The ecosystem, being able to conjure different items, manipulate them within the world. They incorporate that into the combat as well. It was very much a thinking man's Zelda game, and it was pretty interesting to play. While I'm not going to say it was an amazing game, all things considered, I just thought it was okay. But it is an interesting entry in the series, and here's hoping that they experiment more with Zelda games where you actually get to play as Zelda. I think a 3D game where all her abilities are based around her magic would be really cool. So who knows? Maybe Nintendo will give that a try in the future. And now for my game of the year. It was a very tough call as to which game I thought deserved that title more, but I ended up giving it to Silent Hill 2 because I'm just so excited that the Silent Hill 2 remake is as good as it is. Like, I was so concerned that this game was going to be awful, and I know there was a lot of debate as to whether or not a remake of Silent Hill 2 was necessary. I know a lot of people hold the original in high regard, but while the story is great, the presentation is fantastic, it's thematically rich, all that stuff, you have to admit, it didn't hold up gameplay-wise. The original Silent Hill 2 is bad in regards to gameplay. Let's also not forget that the original Silent Hill 2 is also lost media, so a remaster is out of the question. They tried, and they failed epically. So for them to put so much love and care into this remake, in addition to actually make it a game that's fun to play, while still staying true to the core tenets and ideas of the original game, it was just a real treat. Like, I loved the Silent Hill 2 remake so much, and I'm really excited to showcase it next year for Halloween as the 7th generation representation. So yeah, if you're on the fence about this one, for the love of license, people, play Silent Hill 2. You won't regret it. Mario Party Jamboree. Now, this one I haven't had a chance to play yet. I only just got my copy in the mail, and me and the crew are planning to play a great big game of it at some point this week. But Steffi got her copy early, and I had her play a lot of it in order to give me an idea of what this game was for the Mario Party series. And based on what she tells me, this is probably the best one yet. Evidently, there's a lot of fun variations on the rule that you can pick and choose. The minigame collections are great. There's lots of single-player content. It just sounds like everything you would want in a modern Mario Party game. Yeah, so, like, Nintendo, while I wouldn't say they've had a stellar year, they have done overall pretty well, I would say. It's not like they're... Again, people keep saying they just need to go ahead and announce the Nintendo Switch 2, or whatever the successor is going to be called. And I do agree. I think it is time for a hardware update. But if they can still keep putting out good games on a Nintendo Switch, why bother? That's why they haven't done it yet. Take note, Sony, you don't need to be on the cutting edge. The important thing is the game, so put out some damn games. That is all I am asking, Sony. Speaking of Nintendo, we got one more game by them, and that's Mario Brothership. This is actually my first time playing a Mario RPG when it was new, and this one didn't exactly click for me like Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga did, which, by the way, is like, I have an incomplete thought of the Mario RPGs. I've only played Mario RPG, Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Door, and Superstar Saga. So I don't know how Brothership compares to the other Mario and Luigi games, but this one just didn't click with me like Superstar Saga did. The pace was really slow, and I know it was a long game, but I'd rather have a short game with a fast pace to it rather than one that is just kind of meandering around. I felt that was a problem with Brothership. The performance issues were a little annoying, and I felt like it simplified the gameplay a little too much. It also wasn't anywhere near as funny as Mario & Luigi Superstar Saga, but at the same time, it was still a decent game. While the performance was a little crappy, the overall art style was great. I love the cel-shaded visuals here. The battle system was still fun to play, great music, and there's a lot of content here, so while this isn't going to be taking the spot as my favorite Mario RPG anytime soon, it is still one that I would recommend to Nintendo Switch players. And the last game of the year is Indiana Jones in the Great Circle. And like this is one that's like, as far as being an Indiana Jones game, it hits it right on the head. Just exploring the tomb, solving puzzles, being an archaeologist. That's a lot of fun, but there's other parts of the game I think are a little mediocre. The platforming isn't really there. The action isn't terribly good. It's lacking set pieces as well. But, for the most part, it is fun, but I don't think it's anywhere near as good as a lot of people made it out to be. It's more of a solid 6 or 7 out of 10 for me than it is a 9 out of 10 like a lot of people said it is. I feel like nostalgia is strong with this one, but it was still a fun game. Effort was put forth into it. I know people are probably going to get mad at me for saying it, but I would have just preferred they had done Uncharted with an Indiana Jones paint job. But that's just my personal opinion. But yeah, that was 2024 in a nutshell. Not a terribly good year for gaming, but not necessarily a bad one either. Not sure what's coming out in 2025, and in fact, I'm a little concerned about what comes next, but what I really would like to see, what I'm really curious about is what Nintendo's going to do. There are a couple of games that they got coming out that I'm excited for, namely Metroid Prime 4. I really hope that comes out next year. I want the Sands of Time remake. I also want that. But yeah, I'm mostly looking at Nintendo here. Like, Sony, you just need to get your act together. Look at what happened with Astrobot. Look at how well that did with that, and try to build upon that. Like, let's bring back the old franchise. Let's make some smaller games. Enough with the AAA games that you're not sure people are gonna like. But yeah, anyway, thanks for watching my videos this year, guys. I'm actually really excited that I was able to break up to 50 subscribers, which I know is minuscule by the standards of YouTube, but like, I'm just happy that my videos are actually being looked at. It's a pretty cool feeling. I also want to thank Steffi, Autumn, Manny, Gerard, Star, Tony, and all the people who have come on to showcase video games with me, because it's just a lot of fun to share this with everyone. But anyway, I'm looking forward to 2025, so if you got a drink, here's to the coming new year. I'll see you next time.